Roll back, Moisa. Roll back. Roll back. All right, we're back. We are back. We are back. Okay, we're going to get started here. Excuse me. That's right. We are back another week, right? 1st of March. The 1st of March, 2022. Roll back to all those who are live. Roll back to all those who are watching the recording of this once it's recorded. Greetings. Can't say enough of that. Kabul, Muisar. Kabul means welcome. In our Lahaj, our language, Wu-Sabat, Sabaic, Kabul, Muisar. Welcome, family. Okay. With all that being said, for those who do not know me, my name is Peti Sina Tebtu Re'e, and I've been over a 30-year student teacher of the profound doctrine of the master teacher, known to us as Pandabab Yananan, also known as Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, who has been teaching us our ancient culture we identify as Wu-Sabat, also known as Wu-Nawat, which stands for those who make decisions based on sound right reasonability, based on the principles of Ma'at, based on the wisdom of the Hutri. In essence, what that means or translate to is us as Africans, we lived in harmony with natural nature. Today, people call it animism, right? We as an African people are highly spiritual people, and our goal was always about being at one with natural nature. And this was our original culture. And we argued that the problems and the challenges that our people have been dealing with, Black people all over the globe for the last 500 years under racism, white supremacy, the reason why we have so many issues and we're in such a lowly state because we got away from our original way of doing things, our original culture, Wu-Sabat, that unfortunately we've lost knowledge of that. It's going back 6,000 years. We forgot our original way. And we argued that the only solution for Black people as a whole to fix all of our problems we're dealing with is for us to get away from the culture that caused the problems, which is Western culture, and for us to get back to our original culture that solved our problems, which is Wu-Sabat or Wu-Nawab, and we're dedicated. I'm just one of many students who has been trying our best to educate our people on why the culture of Wu-Sabat is the solution, why the culture of Wu-Nawab is the solution. The master has been trying to educate us for 50 years, over 50 some odd years now. And I'm just, like I said, one of many students who are doing the same. Now, we're not above reproach. I do make mistakes. I always like to say, if I make any errors or mistakes, do not hesitate to correct me, and I will do my best to correct myself. But with all that being said, before we get started, we like to start with a prayer. We do every week before we start the class. A prayer is about ritual. It is our way of communicating with the creative force, and it's a way of communicating with our ancestors. Africans, we always identified our ancestors who live or exist on higher dimensions, and this is what our prayer is all about: communicating with them. Okay, we did a lecture on that, so I always tell people to check out the lecture on why we pray. That it's on our channel for those who do not know. With all that being said, let's get started. Bade kalal namasat wufad ko aman kasamun shalal pu'ut. Panen safa kawun pasawa wupa tara. Z kawuna nazula lehe enkum. Manem sabad wu sa'at. Aman hadayan shafe'un. Manen salafu wu nataru. Ajula ye nafasu kum. Afuk shene kawun kuma. Pasawa wu patara. This book is the truth in a way. It was sent down for you all from Sabat Wu Sa'at, star constellation, as a guidance and a healing. From your ancestors and overseers, return to your own. Accept what is yours, the truth and the way. Anun tawa ankum lehe penen shafe un alaj. Anun tawa ankum lehe nasuinun. Anun tawa ankum lehe ashuk. Ankum ata salafunun. Anun ata khara'ukum. Anun talub nasakuma. Anun talub nasakuma. And so nun sayim nataru. And so nun salafunun. Anun ata muspa'u. We thank you all for this healing and cure. We thank you all for not forgetting us. We thank you all for Ashuk. You are our ancestors. We are your children. We seek your help. We seek your help. Help us, divine overseers. Help us, our ancestors. We are Muspa'u. Anun. Atun. Atun. Amun. Jennifer. Okay. All right. Every week we go over the core principles of our culture, Wu-Sabat / Wu-Nawab. For those who are not familiar with it, this is one of the reasons why we go over it. And for those who are familiar with it, I always, stress that you guys really pay attention to our core principles. All of our lectures and discussions are based on these core principles. And it's something it should be memorized in us, because our goal is to strive to live according to our principles as Sabians, right? So it's always a great reminder to keep this in your mind. And that's why I go over every week, not just for the new people, but also for current people who are familiar with it. But again, it's about living it. It's not just knowing it, but living it and practicing these things. Now, principle number 1 is Ashak. And Ashak stands for divine love, right? It's divine love, and all of existence is the creation forces. It's based on Ashak, divine love. We did a lecture on that, so I highly recommend for everyone to definitely check that out if you haven't seen it. And if you have seen it, I'm always going to tell you, watch the lectures again. Always watch them. Keep this information in your mind, especially something dealing with Ashak. Because we're in lack of it. We really need to understand the principles of Ashak. Principle number 2 is resurrection. The goal of resurrection is for us to become goddesses and gods. Once again, by learning to reopen our third eye. Our ancestors over 6,000 years ago, all of our ancestors' third eye were open in ancient times, and we lost those abilities, and it's about learning to restore, our spiritual insight. Okay. And we did a lecture on that, so definitely check those lectures out. Principle number 2 is the wisdom of Dahutri and Ma'at. Dahutri stands for our divine mind, and Ma'at stands for order. We did discussions on that, so definitely check those lectures out. Principle number 4 is relationships. As an African people, we always lived of, for, and by each other. And we did a lecture on that, so guys, definitely check that lecture out. Principle number 4 is morphic resonance / matrix. Morphic resonance deals with sound, tone, color, vibration, frequencies, and matrix deals with the manifestation of these morphic resonant frequencies, guys. Principle number 6 is Leviathan. Leviathan stands for moon culture, aka religion, aka Western culture. We did a lecture on that, so definitely check that out. Leviathan is what we're at war with, so it is imperative that everyone is really clear on what Leviathan is all about. Okay. Principle number 7 is soul and spirit. Your soul is your emotional force. Your spirit is your life force. And we did lectures on that, so definitely check that out. Principle number 8 is health. The key to health is a positive mind. As melanated children, a lot of sunlight, water. The body is 70% water. Fasting, we recommend at least once or twice a week. Herbal diet, as Dr. Sabi talks about. Exercising, rhythmic breathing, meditation, concentration, prayer, and chanting. Health, as we always say, is not just about the physical things you need to do for health, but health is also spiritual. And so you're incomplete if you only dealing with one aspect of your health, and we did a discussion on that, so definitely check that out. Principle number 9 is Pa'ut, which is the creative force. We identify as Pa'ut, and creation or existence is based on cycles. We call it the Smat circle, and the energy, the creation energy, we identify as Akach. It translates as ether, but we call it Akach. Okay. And we did lectures on that, so definitely check those out, especially the lectures we did on the cycles of nature, the African science of existence. Okay, now as Sabians, we have 3 primary goals. Goal number 1 is to raise the self. Goal number 2 is to fight Leviathan, and goal number 3 is to work to build Sabbatia. When it comes to goal number 1, the first thing is you must be born again, right? As the Christians teach. Learn our culture, Wu-Sabat, and to live it, to give up. It's about giving up the old ways of doing things for the new ways of the culture. So that's first key to correcting yourself. And in addition, correcting your name, right? Choosing a Sabian name is extremely important, making that known to all. Correct how you dress, identify with your African culture, clothing. Learn our language, Sabaic. Highly extraordinarily important. You must study our doctrine each and every day. This is how you build your sound right reasoning skills, right? To help you in your decision making is by studying the doctrine and learning to practice the principles and ideas and concepts we teach, and practice and master our daily rituals. And this is the goal of turning yourself inside out. This is how you open up your third eye. And remember, always be positive. You're not going to get anything worthwhile done unless you maintain a positive mind. Second goal is the fight. We're at war with Leviathan, right? And the main part of that is we're fighting the free pad of Babyanan, promoting Wu-Sabat, trying to get our people away from the culture of Leviathan, and become a student teacher and strive to fight the 6 strongest weapons of Leviathan, which is ignorance, fear, ego, anger, your lust / desires, lies / deceptions. These are the energies that Leviathan feed off of on our people. and the negative forces that plague us, and our goal is to overcome these things. And goal number 3 is the work to build Sabbatia. We need our own land, guys. We got to get our land back. We work to support each other in business. We help each other reach positive goals. We help to build our culture. We must set up a landing zone for Panathato in Africa, which means we need land in Africa that would be supported by an African government. Ashuk is the key to accomplish all our goals. Now, what does it mean to be a Sabaean? 1, Sabaean is someone who's thoughtful and cares, someone who's helpful and honest, someone who's responsible and hardworking, someone who demands justice and honorable, someone who's righteous and humble, someone who's positive and cheerful, someone who's loving and peaceful, someone who is kind and considerate, and someone who is neat, clean, and orderly. Our purpose as Sabaeans is liberation from adverse forces. This is what every Sabaean is supposed to be striving for. It's for us to liberate ourselves from adverse forces. In doing so, number 1, you must take action each and every day to free yourself of 60 spirits inside and out, which includes Black people who are possessed by these spirit forces. Number 2, acknowledge and fight 6 ether from promoting capitalism, the gay agenda, miscegenation, the so-called equality of the races, and racism, white supremacy. And number 3, learn, live by, and promote the laws/rules of natural nature. And each one teach one, guys. Each one teach one. Word of advice, do not judge this doctrine by watching the behavior of Panabab Yanani nor his students. Judge this doctrine by the effectiveness of the information, aka information, that you personally put to practical use. This doctrine is based on self-authentication, guys. Know that we are not preachers, but teachers who are dedicated to answering questions until there's a meeting of the minds between the teacher and student, who then can work in unity, which is the only solution to our problems. And here's a quote I added. I wanted, I think it's imperative you guys know this quote and memorize it. It says this: what you do for yourself in kind depends on what you think of yourself in kind. What you think of yourself in kind depends on what you know of yourself in kind. And what you know of yourself in kind depends on what you was taught and by whom of yourself in kind. Okay. Another one. Until the lion have their historians, the hunter will always be the hero. And last, the negative mind talks of what it can't and will not do for self and kind, always complaining about who they don't like or trust, whereas the positive mind always maintains the peace by not complaining about that in which they do not like, but focus on finding solutions to their problems, never allowing obstacles to get in the way of growth. I hope you remember that, guys. Now, with all that being said, for our core principles, as our discussion today is about culture, the key to liberation, guys. Culture, the key to liberation. Okay. If anyone have any questions or concerns as we're going along, do not hesitate to ask. And so let's get started. So first question, what is culture? Okay, culture is defined as the behavior of people in their day-to-day actions and deeds. Culture is the customs of a people or nation of people. For example, the Chinese practice martial arts as a nation of people, or the East Indians practice yoga as a nation of people, or the Europeans practice Christianity as a race of people. Culture is about the habits of people, the ways of people. For example, Americans love to play and watch sports. Americans spend billions of dollars yearly on sports such as football, basketball, baseball. American athletes earn millions playing these sports at a professional level, which goes to show how invested the American people are into the culture of sports. The culture of a people shape their foods, their dress, their language, their educational systems, their work habits, their laws, rules, and regulations. Question: why is culture so important to understand? Answer: well, I always teach that the creator of a culture is the ruler of that culture, and the ruler of a culture is the beneficiary of that culture. Now, let's unpack the meaning of this in detail. Culture sets the standard of living for a people or a person because culture is your day to day habits. Culture could be for you, culture could be good for you habits or bad for you habits. Good cultural habits would be a body of people who exercise every day to maintain good health. Bad cultural habits would be drinking coffee every morning you wake as an energy boost to start your day. Okay, and guys should know coffee is like a drug. Any drug you need to get you started is not a good thing. When a people or a person creates a culture, such as the creation of the telephone or the car, it is clear to see that white people who created these things control these industries, which means that they are the ones who benefit from the economics that is created by these industries. We look at the Ford family or the Tesla owners or the BMW owners or AT&T owners or a person like Steve Jobs, the creator of iPhone. All of these are examples of the power that comes with creating a culture. Black people like to complain about not having ownership or control of the industries that we dominate, such as music or sports. But the reality is that we did not create the industries, we just excel in them. The creator of these industries are the ones who get to control these industries, which simply mean that they are going to be the ones who benefit the most. Take, for example, the money that LeBron James makes is no match to the money made off of him by the owners who pay him. We as Black people should not complain about not benefiting from industries we did not create, even though those industries benefit off of our labor, skills, and finances. Once again, I repeat, the creator of a culture is the controller of that culture, who is also the beneficiary of that culture. They teach that God blessed the child who has his own. As long as we as Black people choose to live under the control of white people, then we must accept the realities that come with their unjust society. So I'm not saying it's fear. Excuse me, I'm not trying to argue that it's fear that we don't benefit the way white people do. But the reality is that, guys, we live in an unjust society. They're not going to be fair. They're not a just people. Unfortunately, we've been dealing with them for 500 years. They haven't showed no signs of justice yet. So we shouldn't expect it, is kind of what we're saying here. We shouldn't expect it. It would be nice if they were fair and honest people, but they're not. And that's a hard reality we have to deal with. So it's better just accept it and focus on what we can do to solve our problems. That's really what we're talking about here. Question: what is African culture of our ancestors and how did we rule? Right? What is African culture of our ancestors and how did we rule back then? To find our original African culture, we must study ancient Egypt and Nubia, guys. When we look at our ancient culture, we will see two main cultural themes. One cultural theme we will see is the lifestyle polytheism, which is the belief of many gods. To call on gods for help, help and assistance. Now, polytheism is the ruling force that took over Africa, where so many of our people have fell into these belief systems. The concept of the many gods is clear to see in Egyptian and most of all other African societies. This concept was about calling on these gods for assistance in a person's day-to-day life pursuits. But if we study African culture more intently, we will see another form of culture that is also very important to make note of. This other culture we speak of is called Noon, or aka NoopooH. also known as Wu-Sabat. And the Greeks, it was known to the Greeks as nous, guys. So this is very key. I've talked about this before. For those who are not familiar with that, in fact, we're gonna kind of go into this word nous of the Greeks, because this is one of the ways of being able to identify, our original culture, the culture of noon, okay, or Wu-Sabat. Now, the culture of noon that existed within Africa was the culture that taught we, or the African, is God and a child of the gods. So as Africans in the culture of noon, we identified ourselves as living gods, and we were the children of gods. The culture of noon was about the individual having the power of God within, that the individual must be responsible for all that happens in their life. Noon culture was opposite to polytheism culture of calling on the gods for help, because because they are something you are not. Excuse me. Because this is something you are not supposed. I'm sorry for that. That's probably a typo. Okay. Okay. Excuse me. Because they are something you are not, as opposed to noon taught one to acknowledge that they are God and can call on other gods for help the same way we call on family members to help when we get into trouble. So kind of what we're trying to say is that, in the polytheism, it's not so much of our people identifying the God power within themselves. They're giving that to other deities or other spirit forces. And in the culture of noon, that's not what this is about. In the culture of noon, you identify yourself as a God force. That doesn't mean you don't call on your ancestors who were also gods in their own right. And so, yes, we call on our ancestors for assistance and help in our day-to-day endeavors, but we also identify our own powers as God. And that's what we forgot, guys. A very important book I talk about a lot is this book, Stolen Legacy, where the good brother who produced this book, this is, one of the things that he talks about in this book right here, Stolen Legacy, where our ancestors, they identified themselves as gods. They were striving to become God. That was one of the ultimate goals of transforming yourself back into a god. Right here on page 61 in the book, it goes into that. They call it the summum bonum, according to Pythagoras. Now, this is the Greek philosopher. What this book was about, we're trying to say what most of what the so-called Greek philosophers were teaching, they got from us Africans. Okay. The Mukasu, the Europeans don't want to admit that, but it's a fact. And so this was one of the principles, right? And this summum bonum meant the supreme good in man is to become godlike. This transformation is to accomplish by virtue, which is a union of opposites of man's faculties, the subordinate of man's lower nature to his higher nature. But the precise purpose of the Egyptian mysteries was to make man godlike by the purification agencies of education and virtue. So again, he's talking about in this book, this is what our ancestors were teaching in our spiritual sciences, those who were initiated into our spiritual sciences. And this is what the culture of noon was about: transforming yourself from mortals back into immortals, but back into gods. And that was the culture of noon. Not everyone who was living in Kemet, Egypt at the time, was trying to do that. That's what I'm saying. A lot of our people just preferred calling on the gods, and they didn't identify their God power within themselves. But we did have those in our culture who understood the science that we were living gods ourselves. And that's what we taught. And so it is imperative that we understand this, guys. Okay, very imperative. And then when you look at this book right here that we put out, the Master Teacher Actual Facts number 108, it's called The Proof by way of Panda Babyanan. you know, um, the master goes into here it says, in the beginning were the sons, and the sons were within for Turiel Fatal, natural nature, and the sons are natural nature. The sons, the true Kakabat stars, are Panatharu, the overseers, who grew absolute natural nature from and of the omniverse, which is all, into universe, which is the all. Let's see. He goes into here. You says let's see, the cycle of order is also the cycle of cosmos, and the cycle of chaos is also is called primordial chaos, and this is based on the principles of space, matter, and time. Of course, cosmo means infinite matter in universal order, and manush or primordial, and babel means chaos, means infinite material in formless disorder. That is to say, material matter without form, figure, or shape. And in order to understand noon, this is the culture. Noon, the mental and ether science of Wu Nawab, as the 9 affirmational news. It is most important that you, as Nawapian students of information, as presented herein, understand this not order and chaos circles and the cycles in upcoming teachings and doctrine, and describing and explaining to them. Noon is pronounced noon. Okay. And so, and then he says that you have right here in this hieroglyph, the 3 new bowls represent noon in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, the script of our ancestors, which was used to keep picture records of the past. They spoke NoopooH and also had a script for its use. Okay, and so here is the master teacher in this book talking about our culture was identified as noon, also Wu-Sabat or Wu Nawab. So I wanted to make that clear for anyone. Okay. All right, so now let's get back. So we're going to say, if we study Egyptian rulers, one can see the culture of noon in full force. The Egyptian and Nubian rulers were identified as living gods who had the power of the gods and would display their power when needed. The Egyptian and Nubian high priests were also living gods who had and displayed the power of the gods, which account for the godlike architecture that they designed and built. If we study the high priest Imhotep and the ruler Zoser of the 3rd dynasty, all the way to the family of Amenhotep III and his family of Akhenaten. So Amenhotep III was the father of Akhenaten, and his son, which is Amun, or King Tut as they like to call him, the famous young ruler, as well as the high priest Amenhotep, son of Hapel of the 18th dynasty. We would see godlike powers and abilities of these African people, guys. Plus, people must realize that our culture is tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years old. Study the recent work of Graham Hancock. Now, for those who don't know, Graham Hancock is a European who has been arguing for decades that the so-called history that's being pushed by popular education is false, that humanity dates back tens of thousands of years, that they're hiding. They've been hiding this, but it's been uncovering slowly but slowly, like the lost city of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, where they uncovered this buried temple, and they found that the temple dates back to almost 12,000 years ago, when they said there was no cultures older than 6,000 years. This is what they would teach. And now they're beginning to have to rewrite that because they're finding historical sites older and older, tens of thousands of years old, guys. So it's important to understand this is how far back we go culturally. Our culture is ancient, is my point. Okay, so realize that white people got us locked within their 6,000 year time frame, which is how old we've been under their spell by their overlords. We forgot our original culture and origins of who we are. Please study the word nous, aka noon, also known as sound right reasoning or cosmic reasoning, the culture of the children of the sun, whose third eye used to be open but now closed and blinded by the lights of fame, fortune, job, status, all in white people's world, and so we are blinded by, unfortunately, their culture is distracting us from developing our spiritual abilities we like to talk about. Now, right here is a picture of one of our ancestors, Dozer, who was the third ruler of the third dynasty. And then below him, you have the high priest, Amenhotep, son of Happel, who was worshipped. Guys, this guy was worshipped as a god, and he was a high priest. This is the image. Now, notice he's in the lotus position that people notice is a famous position for Hindus, right? But this is we did this as Africans. Here he is again, in a sitting position. This is like a meditated position, and this was a master, and our ancestors. He was a high priest in the 18th dynasty, and he was deified. He was worshipped by our ancestors as a deity, a living God. Here's another image of this person named, this is another high priest named Ahnun. His name was Ahnun. Now, he was the brother of Amenhotep III's wife of the 18th dynasty. His wife T. We're gonna show her, which is she's right here. This is T. And she's the wife of Amenhotep. And this is the image of Amenhotep, right? And this was during the 18th dynasty. Now, going back up to her brother, who is Ahnun, what's interesting about him, you see the stance, he has that Masonic stance. And that's why I put the George Washington picture right here in the same Masonic stance, meaning that they basically stole our culture, a lot of our cultural principles, that the Europeans had copied from us, and act like they're the originators of these things, and they're not. And so it's important, to know what our original culture was, what we lived as African people. And I think something you guys need to be familiar with. Let me show you this. When you talk about our ancient culture, it's also good to understand location, geographic location, because look at this. This is now, we're talking about ancient Egypt, and Nubia was the Sudan. Okay, so this is a modern map of the area of today. And if you look at, this is an ancient map. So this ancient map of Egypt and Nubia. I bring this up because everyone lived the same culture. The culture of the so-called Egyptians was the exact same culture of the Nubians, in Africa. And it's just to point out. You gotta keep in mind the time frame we're talking about here. We're going back 6,000 years, 10,000 years, and because when you look at the other parts of Africa, it was mainly populated by the little ones, the Tahites, the Batahites. Not so much of the so-called Bantu African was living in the continent at that time, especially not the Zulu, who were new to Southern Africa. They all came from the north, and a lot of the West African tribes also tell you they came from the northeast, and they migrated to the west. And so it's imperative to get an idea that this was the primary culture of most of our people who, that was living at that time. When you go back 6,000 years ago, they were all living a culture of noon that we forgot. We got away from that original culture, is what I'm trying to say. And then we moved into polytheism. So it's imperative that we understand that or understand that. Okay. Because the discussion here is the importance of culture, guys. You know, culture. We lost our culture. In your culture, you find your power, is the point that we're making here. Here you have, people are familiar with this. This is the statue of a Set and Horus, and how the Europeans copied that. Now, what's important about this particular picture is you'll notice on the forehead of a Set and Haru is the cobra, and that was a sign that their third eye was open. The cobra in the forehead was a sign that their third eyes were open. So, and this is showing our children back then were born with their third eyes open. And of course, their parents' third eye was open. So they was in tune with their higher spiritual abilities. They were in harmony and in tune with nature. This is what our culture was all about. This was what the culture of Noon or Wu-Sabat was about: being in harmony, being in tune with natural nature. You know, so it's imperative that you guys understand this. Right? Here's an image of Asar, Aset, and the baby Haru as a family. You know, as it was copied by the Christians. God the Father, he represented the Father, the Heavenly Father. The Blessed Mother, Aset, she represented the Blessed Mother, and the Holy Child, because she gave birth to the Holy Child through Immaculate Conception. You know, for those who are familiar with that story. And notice Asar was painted green. We painted our ancestors green because this was a color that we used to be before we turned brown the way we are today. And so anybody who has the privilege of going to the temples in ancient Kemet, you'll see that. And you can see it on the internet because they have those original pictures there. And so, like, this is an image of, like I said, the female ruler Nisutet T. She's the wife of Amenhotep III, and she too was deified. She was worshipped as Taweret, which was represented the mother of life. She was the protector of mothers and children in childbirth. Okay, and this symbol Taweret, there was a temple called in Dendera, or they call it the Temple of Dendera in ancient Kemet, that had the zodiac. And Taweret, this was the center of the zodiac, and it represented the principle of mammals and amphibians, that our ancestors were able to exist in the waters as well as on land. You know, but my point that I'm trying to make here is that our ancestors, right, like Nisutet, she lived about 3,500 years ago. They were worshipped as living gods and goddesses. And you notice she has the cobra on her forehead that lets you know that her third eye was open, which meant she was a living goddess. And she was worshipped as such, literally was worshipped as such. You know, and so all of these things are important to notice. And here's Amenhotep, her husband. Amenhotep, he also had the cobra in the middle of his forehead, so his third eye was open. And so that's imperative to know. And so here's another image of Akhnun, which is T. This is her brother. His name was Akhnun. He was a high priest. He was also a prophet. Okay, he was also a prophet. And notice he has you may not notice, but he's wearing a leopard skin shirt, and it has 5-pointed stars. Now the 5-pointed stars represented the star constellation of Sirius, because of our connection to the Nezdaret, the female goddess Aset. She represented the star constellation of Sirius, where our female rulers come from. Where Asar, he represented Orion, or Saha, we called it. And Aset, represented Cyrus. Okay. And the 5-pointed star represented, was a symbol of that star constellation. You see that a lot in ancient Kemet. And what's interesting is this leopard skin uh, uh, um, dress was the same dress that was worn by the priests in ancient Nubia. So this is Ahnun. He's a priest of ancient Egypt, and then a priest in ancient Nubia wore the same leopard skin. I don't know if you guys can see this, but this was one of the rulers of this was a drawing of the rulers of ancient Nubia. I'm not sure which ruler this is supposed to be depicting, but he has a leopard skin. And so this was a traditional dress of our ancestors at that time. You know, they identified with the same principles. And so what's interesting about the star constellation of Sirius was also called Septet, right? And it was identified as Saba. So the word Saba connects to Septet. And that's why we call ourselves Sabaeans. It meant those who connected to the stars, those who were children of the sun, Septet. And so these are the symbols, you know, that connected the people. And then this is an image of Amun-Ra, and this actual artifact was found in ancient Nubia. It wasn't found in Egypt. So I wanted to point out that, like I said before, Nubia as well as Egypt, when you look at the map here, Egypt is on the top, Nubia is on the bottom, right? It was the exact same culture. This is what I'm trying to show you guys, that our people live this culture of noon that we all forgot as Africans. We forgot our original culture, is our point. Oh, Gawada, you said that's an image of Tahaka? I don't know. It could be Tahaka. I know that what's a National Geographic, they were the ones who put that out. National Geographic, they were the ones who put that out, you know. So that's kind of, so I didn't know who they were depicting. It could have been Tahaka, it could have been Shabaka, you know, or Pai. I'm not sure which one, but if it's Tahaka, that's what's up. You know, I don't know. It's a good question. You might be right. You know, here was a quote. This was a quote from our ancestors back then. This is a quote from a priest, Senin Amun, his name. He was a part of the 25th dynasty of Nubia, and it says, "We are the rulers of the world. We stun the world by our knowledge, and we still will though we took the secrets of knowledge with us." And so this was an interesting quote from one of the priests back then. He says, "We are the rulers of the world, guys. This is your ancestors talking. We are the rulers of the world. We stun the world by our knowledge, and we still will, though we took the secrets of knowledge with us." And that is to say, there are many things about our culture that they didn't share with the world. That's for us. That knowledge is, we are privy to that knowledge. This was the purpose of the master teacher. The master teacher came for the sole purpose of re-educating us about that ancient knowledge. This is what we're teaching, our ancient culture. This is the way we liberate ourselves, is getting back to our ancient original culture, guys. I can't stress this enough. Question: were the ancient Sabaeans submerged in the culture of the Malian Empire, Mali, along with the Malian script? Okay. Interesting question. Well, check this out. When you look at the Malian Empire, keep in mind that the Malian Empire was birthed out of the Ghanaian Empire that predated the Malian Empire, right? You know, who was that? The so-called founder of the Malian Empire was a guy by the name of Sundiata. Sundiata. But the Malian Empire was connected to the Ghanaian Empire. Okay, that's important to know, and don't confuse the Ghanaian Empire with the country of Ghana. Ghanaian Empire just means Ghana. The word Ghana means gold because our ancestors had a lot of gold. Okay, and so this was on the west coast of, on the west coast of Africa. But keep this in mind: when ancient Kemet, here's the key, right? When ancient Kemet was invaded by the taken over by the Greeks, when Alexander the Greek, when they took over in the years 300 BC, right? 300 BC. They started to persecute our people. Okay, the Greeks did. And when the Greeks came in, when the white man came in, guess what he did? He set up a tax system, and he started to force our people to pay taxes to the Greeks. And so what did our people do? They started to migrate. So they started to migrate out of Kemet, out of Egypt. They migrated into the Sudan, and then they started to migrate west. And these are the people who began to populate these western states. And people argue that a lot of the people who were part of the Ghanaian Empire came out of Kemet and Nubia, migrating west from east to west. This goes into the Dogons, because the Dogons are in Mali, and the Dogons argue they came from Kemet. They migrated there. So, I guess to try to answer the question is, it's the same people, same culture. By that time, I'm sorry, because when you're dealing with the Ghanaian Empire, they're saying, okay, that was around 1000 AD. Conservative number. What is it? The Mayan Empire, I don't know, 1200 AD. All in that time frame, or the Ghanaian Empire, like 800 AD, and then the Mayan Empire comes in around 1200 or something. Because after the Mayan, because it was three successive societies, right? You first had the Ghanaians, then after the Ghanaians fell, then came the Mayans and the Mayan Empire, and after the Mayan collapsed, then came the Songhai. Right. And so that was it was all of those states, because the Songhai, they fell in the 1500s. Well, the beginning of their fall was in the 1500s, and I think they was completely done by the 1800s. The Songhai Empire. So all of the states in West Africa were basically conquered by the 1800s. But that question about the Mayans and the Sabaeans and Sabaean culture, that's an interesting question, because when you look at the Yoruba claim to come from ancient, from Mecca, right? And so the Sabaeans, it depends on the Sabaeans you were talking about, because if we're talking about the Sabaeans that lived in southern Arabia and Yemen, obviously they were pushed out. The brothers who were living in southern Arabia, and I believe some of them became what we know today as the Dungala tribe, or connected with the Dungala tribe that the master talks about, with the Prophet Muhammad's family leaving Mecca, Medina, and moving to the Sudan because they were being persecuted by the Pale Arabs. But that's a very complex, history. I think there's some brothers who were doing research on that stuff. They used to come on, I forget the brother's name, used to come on our good brother Pharaoh's show, and they were talking, they were supposedly working on that history in detail. So they would be good resources to talk to on that. I hope they come on here because, I like the things that those brothers are working on. Oh, okay. I overlooked 2 questions. All right, hold on. Let me check. Let me check, guys, and see what I missed. If I missed a couple of questions. Okay, so question T Tiger. So do we all call out Asar, Aset, Haru, and can we place statues of them in our on our altars? Absolutely. We absolutely T Tiger, and we call out to them every day. Every day we're calling out to them in our prayers when I do those prayers, right? So cuz like where am I? Hold on, let me find it, right? So this is our prayer system, okay? And then when you go down to the bottom of it, we do the attributes of our ancestors and we call on them. The Nathar, right? Some people pronounce it as Natir, but we say the correct enunciation is really Nathar. And so you have Yaye Atum Re'e, Yaye Nathar. So we calling on Atum Re'e, right? For help. We always calling on our ancestors for help, guidance, for power. We say Yaye Nun, Yaye Nathar. We calling on Nun. Yaye Nun Tat. Yaye Nathar Tat. That's the female. Our female ancestors. So when you see Tat at the end of the word, that represents the female. When it's not there, that's the male, right? So you say Yaye Ha, Yaye Nathar. Yaye Ha Tat, Yaye Nathar Tat. Yaye Kak, Yaye Nathar. Yaye Kak Tat, Yaye Nathar Tat. Yaye Amun, Yaye Nathar. Yaye Amun Tat, Yaye Nathar Tat. Now, that represented the Khamunu. Now, the Khamunu, I think we have 4 major cities in ancient Kemet, right? You had Heliopolis, you had Thebes, you had Hermopolis, and you had the city of Khanum, right? And so each of the cities represented these different deities. So that I think Khanum, the city of Khanum, represented what we call the Khumunu or the Mufta'u, or the Europeans call it the Agdogs. Those are our primordial ancestors. They were the original ancestors who incarnated that we descended from. And then from them, you get the Subdeptu. We get the Subdeptu, right? And we call on them. So you have Yaye Atum, Yaye Nathar, Yaye Shashash, Yaye Nathar, Yaye Tafaf Natat, Yaye Nathar Tat, Yaye Sabab, Yaye Nathar, Yaye Natat, Yaye Nathar Tat, and Yaye Arash Tat. Now that's a set. We corrected her name. It's not a set, but it's Arash Tat, Yaye Nathar Tat. And then you have Asar right below. Yaye Asar, Yaye Nathar. So we call on that because we talk about calling on our ancestors 3 times a day, right? 9 a.m. we teach, 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. And we do it for synchronization. When you're doing spiritual work, it's always good to synchronize with others in those time zones. It makes the spirit energy that much stronger to make contact with our ancestors. And so this is a big part of our culture, a huge part of our culture that we do every day. And so, yes, I have statues of Asar. I have statues of Aset. I got a bunch of stats. I got, first of all, I have Ma'at, and I have the Hutari, right, who represents our divine mind and wisdom, and Ma'at represents our moral principle and guides we live by, the morals of Ma'at, right? And then I have Bess. Bess is the protector. Everyone should get a statue of Best in their house. He's there to protect to protect you. You can put up a spiritual shield around yourself, around your home, around yourself. You're calling on your ancestors. This is what we get into with the master talked about us, developing our own psychic self-defense, guys. And so it's real important. What else? There was another question. Question. What an ancient. Okay, that was the same one. Okay. Oh, peace. Question. Can we find evidence of ancient Egyptians here in the ancient Americas? Okay, well, they said there was evidence of that in the Grand Canyon, but the Mukaso hid it. They hid it. They covered it up. They said there was evidence of ancient Egyptians coming to the Americas, but they hid that because they said the master told us Hatshepsut, she used to come here and visit as a vacation. They said that the West here in the West was a vacation spot, and a lot of our ancestors used to live in. Remember, Atlantis was here. Atlantis was in the West, right? This was Atlantis. Okay, this is where it was located. That's why if you anybody who knows off the coast of Cuba, and in the ocean there, where Cuba is, if you go underwater there's pyramids there. There's pyramids under the water right next to Cuba. For those who may not know that. Okay. Question. We are so separated as a people and as a tribe. How do we, as individuals, first develop cultural adhesion with others of our kind? So, like, guys, if you go back to the principles, right, in that question, if you go back to the principles that we go over, the principles of where are we at here? Okay, our core principles that we go over, right, every week, right? So now if we go down to the bottom of those core principles, I say right here, know that we are not preachers, but teachers who are dedicated to answering questions until there is a meeting of the minds between the teacher and the student, who then can work in unity, which is the only solution to our problems. Now, the only reason why we're not working together as a collective group is because we have divided minds. We still don't see things the same way. We don't even see the doctrine the same way, a lot of us. We have our own interpretations of what we think things are. That's why I do the classes. The whole point of me even doing these lectures all the time is to find to unify of how I see the doctrine versus everyone else. And if I'm making mistakes, it's the job of you guys to correct me so we can go over those things so we can come to an agreement. Because once we start agreeing on everything when it comes to the doctrine, then we'll start doing things together. We'll start wanting to do things together. But the reason why we don't want to do things together, because we don't agree on everything. We don't agree. And that's why I need you guys to talk, ask questions. We all need to come to the same conclusions. Once we all start coming to the same conclusions, then we'll start making plans and say, okay, we can do this now. We can work with each other on this level, or we can help each other on that. But we're not going to do it. We're not going to be working and supporting one another because we see things differently. We see way too many things differently, and that's our problem. There has to be a cultural cohesion. We have to see, these things, we have to agree. I mean, it's pointless. The master teacher said it, divided minds, divided people, united minds, united people. Right. And that's why I read that quote, this quote I started, I added to our little, our principles, right? Says, what you do for yourself in kind depends on what you think of yourself in kind. What you think of yourself in kind depends on what you know of yourself in kind. And what you know of yourself in kind depends on what you was taught and by whom of yourself in kind. Now think about that quote, the concept that we're trying to say here. You know, we all have to see these things. We all have to agree on how we see these things. Once we can come to a cohesion and agreement, and we see these things collectively the same way, then we'll start doing things, together. That's our goal, man. That's our goal. That's our goal. All right, so let me get back. Let me get back to where we were, right? So another point. Another question was, are we so separated as a people? We are so separated as a people and as a tribe. How do we as individuals first develop cultural adhesion with others? That I just answered that. That's what's up. All right. Question: is the Great Blue Hole a portal? From Kim, is the Great Blue Hole a portal? I don't know what that is, Kim. You're gonna have to educate me now. What is the Great Blue Hole? What is the Great Blue Hole? Where are you getting that from? Where's that? I don't know. I've never heard of that. So I don't know. You have to educate me on what you're talking about, and then maybe we can look at it together and figure it out. I don't know. Okay, so here's the other thing, right? I was going to say the ruler Shabaka introduced us to what we call a Memphite theology, which teaches us that Panatharu Ptah spoke words of power by way of his heart, and creation began, right? And this is where the Bible get it. In the beginning was the word, right? Because this is something we taught, right? The deity Ptah, he spoke the words of creation by way of his heart. The heart represents your soul force, your emotional force, divine love, ashak. And with that spoken word, creation came into existence. And we argue, it's too much of a coincidence that, the Christians have in their Bible in John chapter 1, in the beginning was this spoken word. Okay, she said it's in Belize. It looks like an eyeball. I'll look into it. I never heard of that before. Whether or not it's a portal or not, I never heard of it. But be mindful of any portals, guys. You can only go through a portal if your morphic resonant frequency is in alignment with the resonant frequency of that portal. You don't want to go through any time portal unless your morphic resonant frequency is in alignment with it, or you'll wind up just like what happened in the Philadelphia experiment, where those guys got embedded in the ship and all kinds of things happened to them because their morphic resonant was off. Or as the master said, their zero time reference, which is really a morphic resonant frequency, was off. It wasn't in sync. So if when you're doing time travel, in order to be able to do that, your morphic resonant has to be in alignment with the cosmos in order to travel from one dimension to another dimensional realm. Okay, so keep that in mind. Yeah, all right, that's what's up. All right, so it says, as we can see above, our culture showed knowledge, wisdom, power, and how we rule. For the key to ruling is having a powerful culture, guys. The key to ruling is having a powerful culture. So I wanted you guys to clearly see, that anyone who studies ancient Kim and ancient Nubia can see that we came from a very powerful culture that we lost, that we forgot. We forgot all of these things, of how we were living, how we were ruling. And keep in mind, they started to hunt down. The Romans were hunting down the priesthood, who had this knowledge. And so a lot, because like I said, what happened when the Romans and the Greeks took over, they started persecuting us. Okay. And so the brothers who were living in Kemet, we first migrated into Nubia. and then they left Nubia and they either went further south, right, where you see our people in like the Congo area and Kenya and Somalia and Uganda, right, or they went west, and so they spread throughout the continent. This is how the continent got populated within the last 5,000 years, because you're talking about a 5,000-year timeline. And so we had different successive migrations. The main was, now they talk about this western expansion of the Bantus who were in the west of Africa. They said that happened about 2,000 years ago. They was in the west coast of Africa, and then they migrated to the east coast of Africa. And I have some reservations about that, but I can't make no real arguments on it. But because I know the Tahites were living in the west, just so you guys know, it's reported that the Tahites were living on the west coast of Africa. The Tahites, the little ones, they were living basically everywhere except for this northeastern part. They were kicked out of that area. Question, T Tiger, the Kabbalion is the Kabbalion a better source of information than the Bible, and is the Kabbalion and Kabbalah the same books? Yeah, it's the same. It's the same information. Okay, it's not that one source is better than the other. There are two types of information. When you're dealing with the Kabbalah, and you're dealing with the Bible, they're two types of information, because all that information was coming out of ancient Kemet. But like I was saying, when the Greeks and the Romans came in, they were taking that information and they were creating their own cultures out of it. This is what created the Gnostics, right? And so the Jews were the ones who set up the Kabbalah. And keep in mind, the Jews were living in ancient Egypt as the Habaru people, or the however they call them. They call them the Hika Kasut was a name for them. And they were living in ancient Egypt in like 1500 BC, and they were kicked out of Egypt, and this is where they populated Israel or Palestine at that time. They went and populated that area, and that's how they became the so-called Hebrew Israelites, because they were in Kemet, and then they was kicked out. But they had the culture, and they had the culture from Kemet, and they combined the culture from ancient Samaria, right? Because the Bible is part Sumerian culture and part Egyptian culture. It's a blend between the two. So it is, it's important that we understand those things. All right, let's get back to what we're saying here. So question, what about African American culture? Is that important, right? That's a question. African American culture is very important as a point of history to never be forgotten, but not as a culture that will bring us back to rulership. Sadly, African American culture and basically most Black culture around the world today are copies of what we have learned to do while living under white people's culture. Black people in America and around the world have helped shape Western culture as we know it today. When we look at white people's culture before 500 years ago, you see a very dull culture, mostly based on religion and warfare. With Black people living with white people, we see a drastic shift in white culture when it comes to music, dance, sports, arts, etc. Black people take pride in our music, from jazz to rock to R&B to rap, or the dances we created or do, like the Nicholas brothers of the 1940s, or the Les twins of today, or our sports achievements of Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, Usain Bolt, Venus and Serena Williams, Simone Biles, right? And so The point is, we're trying to say, guys, is that yeah, it's okay to feel proud about what we've developed as so-called African Americans, the culture we developed here in the West. But we got to keep in mind that this culture is a reflection of us being on the European culture. It's not a reflection of our Africanness. And we're talking about culture is the key to power. Culture is the key to liberation. But you're not going to get liberated from borrowing someone else's culture and just improving on it, is what we're trying to say. Even though we did some phenomenal things in this culture, in American culture. And I know a lot of our people don't want to give it up, but it's not the culture that will bring you to power. You have to create your own culture if you want to bring yourself to power. Because remember, it is the creator of the culture, is the rule of that culture. The rule of the culture is the one who's going to benefit from it, right? And so if you notice, we don't benefit from the music industry. White people control that. We don't benefit from sports. White people control that. The only people that benefit is the people who excel at it. Your LeBron James and different people they're still getting a check though. They don't control it, is the point. If you really want to control, you have to be the one who create it and control the industries. And we don't control it here in America. So I know a lot of our people don't want to give it up. They don't want to give up what we've done here. But the reality is that we've done this under the control of the European. It has nothing to do with our Africanness, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, T-Tag asked a question. I want to read our books with no copy. What do you recommend that date back that far on our spirituality? But you got to keep in mind, when you're dealing with T-Tag, when you're dealing with spirituality, a lot of that stuff was taught mouth to ear. They did not write a lot of that stuff down. It got written down because of people like the Greeks. When you go back to the Gnostics, okay, and it got into the different spiritual orders. So for instance, if you was to study the Sufi orders coming out of Egypt and the Sufi orders that are in the Sudan, this is where you get into our spiritual knowledge that came out of ancient Kemet. Okay, because this is our origins as being students of the master teacher. When he first introduced us to our culture, the master introduced us to Sufism. Back in the 60s, we were called Ansar Pure Sufi. Ansar was the name of the tribe that came out of ancient that came out of the Sudan. And by one of our ancestors, his name was the Mahdi Muhammad Ahmed. He was a spiritual master in the 1800s. The Mahdi. He was a spiritual master in the 1800s. And a lot of our spiritual knowledge was being taught from mouth to ear. And this stuff come out of ancient Kemet. A lot of this stuff wasn't written. Well, it got written down because the Mukasu, the Caucasians, were going to these areas in Kemet. They was going to India, like people like Madame Blavatsky and them, and they were getting the information and they started to write it down. This was going on in the 1800s. Well, it started before the 1800s. This goes back to when the Moors were ruling Spain. And you got to research a guy named John Dee, who was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth in the 1500s, 1400s. And they were getting the spiritual knowledge. This is how they created their secret societies, the Masons and all of them were getting this information. They just didn't understand the science of it. But now we live in a day and time. We're the ones who have this spiritual knowledge. The master teacher, he was the one that's teaching the real spiritual science of our ancestors. But like I said, this kind of stuff was being taught mouth to ear. So you're not going to find no real ancient manuscripts, not that I know of. And it's not in the Meta. Not to my knowledge, it's not in the meta. That's what the Amara Squad like to talk about all the time. They trying to claim that all this spiritual stuff came out of India. I mean, that's crazy, but they say it because they it's not in the meta or whatever. And I think it's weird because our good brother Infodici, He contradicts all of them. He's like, no, ancient Kemet was the foundation of spiritual science. The brother Infodici, check him out. And he constantly was going to Kemet. He said he was teaching out there in the Sudan. So I'll take his word over the brothers from the Amara Squad every day of the week. The brother Infodici, I give him a lot of respect. Point being is that, to my knowledge, T Tiger, I don't know about, as far as getting books on that, ancient books, that is, ancient stuff, they hide that stuff was high. Anything that was available was high. Like, during the library of Alexandria, they stole a lot of that knowledge. Now keep in mind, a lot of our priesthood, they went underground. That's what I was trying to say. When they left, when the Romans were persecuting us, the Greeks were persecuting us, a lot of the priests, they went into Nubia. And that's what I'm saying. They became the Sufi Muslims. They became Sufi Muslims. Because remember, we were living our Egyptian culture and Nubian culture up into the 600s AD. And when the Arabs came in, they started to persecute and crack down on the culture, because the Romans allowed us to live the culture to an extent, and the Greeks allowed us to live the culture. Now, of course, the Romans started to persecute us because they started to change our temples into churches. But this happened when they started to convert into Christianity. So, the Romans took on Christianity around 300, the 300 AD, because the Christianity was an offshoot from our cultures of Asar and Set. Our ancestors who were part of those spiritual cultures, right? The spiritual practices of Asar, the cult of Asar, they call it, and the cult of Set, that turned into Christianity, starting with the Gnostics, going at in ancient Greeks, and so it can get complex. Question: do you find it strange black scholars never talk about the Mahdi? They will talk about everyone else. Yeah, the only person I ever heard to talk about the Mahdi was John Henry Clark. He did talk about the Mahdi. Most other black scholars, they don't talk about the Mahdi, because you got to keep in mind, the Mahdi was a mystic and he was very private. Keep in mind, the Mahdi lived in a cave. He was confusing even his own people at that time. This guy conquers the British army. He's the ruler of the Sudan, and he decides to live in a cave. He didn't even want to deal with the people. And remember, the Mahdi transitioned at the age of 40. So, there's a lot that people don't know about, because the master said the Mahdi, he resurrected out of his body. He left this dimension. He left because I think the people just wasn't getting it. I think the master was trying to say, but nah, real talk. No, they don't talk about the Mahdi. He's, Shaka Zulu is more flamboyant than the Mahdi, and so they like to talk about someone like that. But the Mahdi, he wasn't flamboyant. Plus, I think they had an issue. A lot of the black scholars have an issue with Islam. They don't understand the origin of Islam, and they think that Islam was something, a creation of the Pale Arabs. That the Pale Arabs, they took that culture from the black Arabs, basically. So, I think a lot of them avoid that discussion. But it is what it is. And check this out. In dealing with our culture, guys, because talking about as our African American culture, I think it's very powerful. Hopefully, YouTube don't get mad at me. I'm gonna play this. These brothers right here. If you guys heard of the Nicholas brothers, they were like the top dancers in the 40s. in a time. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. They were phenomenal, but this goes into the African American culture. Again, it's something for us to cherish. It's something for us to never forget. But at the same time, it still connects us with the European, and with culture is supposed to lead you to power. Is the whole point of this discussion. But check this out. Now, this is Cab Calloway, for those of you who don't know who this is. Let me dig this jive once more, boy. Right on down to get up. Oh, boy. Gotta take time to get up. Now get you hear those hep-haps go. Come on, boys, let's have a ball. The jim jam jump if jive makes you dig your jive on the mellow side. Hep hep. Hip hip. The jim jam jump is a silent jive. Makes you 9 foot tall when you're 4'5". Hip hip. Hip hip. Now don't you be that inkaroo, get hip, come on, and then you follow through. You get your study full, you make them the joint and jump like the gators do. Jim jam jump as you jump in jive, makes you like your eggs on the Jersey side. Hip hip, hip hip. The jim jam jump in jive makes you hep hep on the Mahala side. Boodly 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 biddly bumpity goodly giddly bang 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 da. Now I've told you about the jumping jive. Jim jam jump the jumping jive. You got to dig this mellow jive. Yes, yes, you dig it on the mellow side. A boodly 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 boy. Boodly boodly boy. Biddly biddly gay. Boodly giddly bumpity gaga. A boodly jive boy. Going to get bang the bomb bomb. See the night boy. Now, these are the Nicholas brothers, guys. Very famous dancers, some of the best dancers of their time in the 1940s. Now, I mean, these guys were bad at that time, and like I said, in the 40s, and today you have the Les twins, who, they're the counterpart. Now, I'm not gonna play them, but um, these guys right here. Hold on. These guys right here are our modern day version of of um of those two brothers, and who are phenomenal dancers. If you guys are not familiar with the Les twins, check them out. They're just phenomenal. They're some of the best dancers in the world right now. And the Nicholas brothers were the best dancers at their time in the 40s, and so it just goes to show that, yeah, we've done some powerful things. And first of all, the Les twins are from France. I believe they're born and raised in France. They're French, but they're brothers. They're brothers. And so I'm just saying, black people all over the world have done and do phenomenal things culturally, but it's still connected to the West. Is my point. It's quite connected to the West, and with culture comes power. What culture comes power is the key, guys. This is what I'm trying to home in on, And so I say here, we should be very proud of those of us who excelled under racism, white supremacy. We should be proud of black leadership from Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, Marcus Garvey, Noble Drew Ali, Elijah Muhammad, A. Philip Randolph. For those who don't know him, you need to know him. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., Yahweh Ben Yahweh, Louis Farrakhan, and Dr. Malachi Z.K. York. All those I missed. Our culture living in the Western world has sadly been one of struggle for equality. We must realize the truth of culture is about control and economics. With all the great things that black people have achieved living in Western culture, we are far from equality because culture is about control. And even though we may have brought life to the culture of white people, we do not share in its profits because we have no control, because we have no power. Culture comes with political power, which is something we had in ancient Africa. But we have no such power living under the rulership of white people. White people show zero interest in sharing political power other than for show, like Barack Obama or Kamala Harris, whose job is to maintain the power structure of white people. This is why it is silly asking black people with so-called political power to get reparations, which is something black politicians have been asking since 1989. The Congressman John Conyers introduced Bill H.R. 40 that white politicians as well as white Americans mock at him. They don't want to honor the reparations, and brothers in politics have been asking for decades. Because again, they have the power, they have the control, they have culture. Now check out our brother Dr. Asa Hiller on this point of culture, the importance of culture, guys. Here, I played this once before in a video of Asa Hilliard. Check this out.
This is the bad boy here. This was Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, Brzezinski. This one does not come from the right. He comes from the left. Remember what I said earlier? Two cousins get to fight, and then both of them get together and agree on their agenda. So this is written in 1995, this book. This is before, I might add, 9/11. I have to tell you that because you're going to think it came after 911 as soon as you see what he got to say. I also want you to pay attention to what he says about Africa in here, because several of these books mention Africa, but you don't want to know what they say. The formation of a comprehensive integrated Eurasian geostrategy is therefore the purpose of this book. So he wrote a book about how to take over the world. Now, you would think that they would talk about weapons of mass destruction. You know the rule in the world today, the new geopolitical rule that only white people can have weapons of mass destruction. That's the rule. If you haven't, try that out anywhere. See who has them and who doesn't have them, and then see who can get them and who can't get them. And all you have to do is draw a color line. That tells you who can have them. All right? Now, but that's not where the power comes from, according to Brzezinski.
Listen to this. Listen to this.
Rome's imperial power derived from an important psychological reality. I am a Roman citizen. The exalted status of the Roman citizen was an expression of cultural superiority. That's the key word, cultural superiority. That's how you have power. How you get cultural superiority? Cultural superiority taken for granted by rulers. We know we're superior. Conceded by the subjugated. Who's the subjugated? Black folk. You concede, yes, you are superior. And my only job is to get some of that superiority. Just please, master, let me in your classes so I can learn Russian, so I can learn to speak French, so I can learn to do whatever and whatever. We ain't finished yet. As I said, this is the genius of all of them. Brzezinski says this: the overseas British Empire was initially acquired through a combination of exploration and then trade and then conquest. I might add in that order. But much of its Roman and Chinese predecessors or its French and Spanish rivals, it also derived a great deal of its staying power from the perception of British cultural superiority. That's how they rule the world. How could you send 1,000 people out and control a continent unless you had something other than guns? You couldn't even shoot at all the people. But if you can control the thinking, cultural superiority successfully asserted, quietly conceded, had the effect of reducing the need to rely on large military forces to maintain the power of the imperial center. That's the advice given to Jimmy Carter now, not to George Bush. Y'all still with me? A mere glance at the map also suggests that control over Eurasia would almost automatically entail Africa's subordination. I'm reading from the lesson plan. That's Brzezinski's lesson plan. A little earlier, I was reading from Huntington's lesson plan. A little earlier, I was reading from Kotkin's lesson plan. The one thing they may disagree on whether there's 5 civilizations or 3, but they don't disagree on domination. And they don't disagree that culture is the way to domination. Now, what are 1 billion Africans supposed to do in a world where the game is cultural integrity? And where there's a cultural war on your ability to have cultural integrity. That means awareness and knowledge of self. That people will do whatever they can. They'll shut down every Black studies program when it gets to the point that they're producing the information that informs Africans about themselves. Why? Because you want to preempt their capacity to resist when you come for what it is that they have.
So you see that our good brother Asa Hilliard, who was a psychiatrist or psychologist, excuse me, and he's trying to explain the importance of culture, that they know, the rulers, the Mukasu know the key to ruling is culture, guys. This is what I'm talking about. And he's reading from books. These are books were written by Mukasu, Caucasians, and they were part of think tanks. And all they do is they pay to think, to analyze how to control the world. And he was talking the first guy book he was reading from a guy named Brzezinski. He was a part of the Democrats. Brzezinski is the guy who's responsible for Barack Obama getting elected president. He was one of the advisors of Barack Obama. The other guy was Huntington. Huntington represents the Republicans' think tank. They're outthinking us. What do I say at the end of all my lectures? At the end of all the lectures, I say what? Knowledge rules ignorance. Knowledge rules ignorance. Your adversary will never give you the correct knowledge in order for you to rule yourself. That's why we keep arguing. The master teacher said, I'm the one with the right knowledge. We're the ones who are teaching the knowledge of how we used to live culturally. The culture of Noon. The culture of Wu-Nawab. Wu-Sabat. You have to get back to your original culture, how you rule. Because keep in mind, if you study the Romans, the Greeks explicitly outlawed our culture. Research it. I'm sorry, if I would have thought of it, I would have showed you the books. I got the books how I got a book. It was a book on how the Romans ruled Egypt. How the Romans ruled Egypt. I got writings on how the Greeks ruled us. That's why it was a huge migration. There was a huge migration of Egyptians out of the country, and they were moving into the Sudan, into Nubia, and they were moving west because they were being persecuted by the Greeks and the Romans. People ask, well, what happened to the original Egyptians? They moved into inner Africa. That's right. Reread the book, The Spell of Leviathans, part 1 and 2. Reread that. The power of the spell. Guys, you got to understand the power of culture. This is what the master teacher has been trying to drill in us that we must learn to embrace our cultures. With culture comes power. Question: if culture is so important to having a good life, then what should we do? Answer: Black people around the world must be educated as to the importance of culture. We don't understand the challenges that come with embracing foreign cultures or having our children educated by foreigners. These behaviors are the main keys to destroying a body of people. Our ancestors were very protective over their culture and very mindful when it came to embracing foreigner ways. Africans, anybody researching ancient Egyptians, that was their number one thing. They had no interest in embracing no one's culture. They knew the science. Our ancestors knew the science. Today, as Africans, all we do is copy everyone else. This is the problem. Look at the example of the Wu-Tang Clan and how people like RZA have made so much money for Chinese people who would never share any of that money with us, even though we are responsible for making Chinese culture popular among Black people. We spend billions every year with Koreans, Arabs, and the East Indians who never give back to us or support any of our businesses as we support theirs. We are making other people rich by supporting what they do culturally while we stay poor. Nothing will change until we are able to educate our own children, teaching them the importance of supporting our own. Right? You have the brother Umar Johnson has the right idea. He talks about this. I just think that his problem is understanding the concept of Black people having a unified culture. He makes a point of arguing that Black people are allowing culture to divide us, and that Marcus Garvey built his movement with millions of Black people, even though many had different cultural points of view. I would argue that the Garvey movement did not survive because of the cultural differences. We must realize that our ancestors ruled for tens of thousands of years before because we shared one common culture. All conquering nations know that in order to rule a people, you must destroy their culture. And the first thing you take is their language, because language relates to culture. Language shapes how you think and see life. All one needs to do is study languages of foreigners, and you will see how they have so many different concepts on life when compared to other cultures. Language connects people together, which is why Black people in America developed our own version of English, aka broken English, or what they call slang, right? Or Ebonics, or why American English differs from the Queen's English. Dr. York, from the very beginning of teaching us, taught us the importance of language and why we must stop using English because of how it consciously and unconsciously connects us with white culture. We are yet to realize that English keeps us locked into American culture and thinking like white people, which is why we suffer from the same bad moralless behaviors. We drink like them, we smoke like them, we watch porn like them, we cheat like them, we steal like them, we kill like them, we share the same unnatural nature values as them. This is not who we originally were 500 years ago, but this is who we became in the 21st century with our blonde hair and tattoo body painting styles. You know, all the you see the NBA players, they got tattoos all over themselves. I'm like, what's up with the NBA and tattoos? I'm like, it's crazy. And like, we got a blonde hair epidemic. Yeah. And that's because we identify with their culture. Oh, Black women running around in Africa 500 years ago with blonde hair, that didn't even exist. Now you can't have no famous Black woman without some blonde hair running around. In fact, I think Mary J. Blige, she turned her hair permanently blonde. You don't ever see her without blonde hair anymore. How many of our young girls Beyonce converted to wearing blonde hair? Let me see where I'm at. We're running out of time. There's so much to cover. Let's see. Okay, question. How can we find a way to educate our people culturally, right? Question. Dr. York has written hundreds of books on Black culture and how we should be living, but I believe a lot of students have a hard time understanding the power of our doctrine. I believe that we must find better ways of educating students of Wu-Sabat. I believe that media is key. We need better ways to market what we teach to Black people. People have been reading our books for decades, but we don't see a movement of Dr. York books worldwide. I think the reason why we don't see this movement is due to the lack of comprehension of the readers of our books. I have these question and answer classes to help people with learning to understand our doctrine, but I notice very few people who listen to me seriously reading our books that I'm always recommending. Meaning, like, I have like what 1,600 subscribers to our channel, but look how many people you guys come. You know, I don't get 1,600 people to chat. Nowhere near that at all. So, you know, they watch, but they're not, how can I say, they're just not gravitating receptive. I'm talking about the mass majority of the people who listen to who watch these videos. You know, the goal of our lectures is for there to be a meeting of the minds between the teacher and the student so that we can start working together to solve our problems. I have been teaching online since 2016, and I've yet to get one person who really understands our doctrine or agree really, and have made the same commitment I have made to spreading the truth of what we teach. Meaning, working together is what I'm really trying to say. Is the whole goal, like I said, is a meeting of the mind so we can start planning together. But that hasn't happened, not for me. It hasn't happened, that meeting of the minds and say, hey, let's do this, let's do that, let's do this, let's do that, and we got to get to that point. But it only will work if we have a meeting of the minds. We have to agree on the same cultural concepts. That's the key, guys. It says I have worked with many students of this doctrine for the past 30 years, and all of them left the culture to live white culture, including all of the slanderers who claim that our organization is so bad, but these same people conveniently support white culture each and every day, showing no plans on how to build a black nation of justice. Black people love to complain about each other without ever showing solutions to the problems they claim is so bad. Dr. York has many haters, but none of them can compare to what Dr. York has accomplished for Black people. What we teach has shaped people's lives for the better. We teach very important things about our history and culture that no one else does, but the haters will never point these things out. The negative mind only looks at so-called problems while ignoring the solutions, and this is a huge issue of ours. I know the master got a lot of people don't like the master. One of the reasons because he critiqued a lot of other people's cultures. We wrote books about the Hebrew Israelites. We really did a number on writing about Christianity. And they get upset when they feel you're attacking their culture, but it wasn't about the master teacher and attacking their culture. It was about attacking truth versus lies. It's just our people have been introduced to cultures that we have adapted from the European, and we've been lied to. And that's what the master teacher was attacking, the lies that we embrace and that we need to give it up. But our people don't like it. And this is why Dr. York has been unpopular, because he pointed out all of the lies of all of these different cultures our people were living. That's why he doesn't get the support he should get, because people hate someone shining a light on their dirtiness, or they don't like it, and it's sad, but it's a reality. It's just it's a sad reality, and what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And so it is what it is. Let me see. Says what about the children? All know that the children are the future. If you want to protect them, make certain that your children will only be influenced by the cultural ideals and by your cultural ideals and no one else. The reason why since slavery, each generation of Black children have less morals than the previous is because we allow foreigners to teach and influence our children in the most negative ways. The media has been our biggest adversary when it comes to our children. Every day, our children are exposed to indecent or inappropriate behavior in the media. If we don't put a stop to the negative influences of our children, we have no chance of raising a people. Black children have no concept of liberation from white people's culture because they have no idea of any alternative that they could choose from. Black children have no other ideas of culture outside of what they are taught in schools or with family and friends or in the media. We can only do what we know. If all you know is trying to make money, buy a house, get a job, find a husband or a wife, go to sporting events, etc., this is all you will do. Our children are not taught to have an African mindset because most Black adults have no idea what an African mind means. Our culture is noon culture. being in harmony with natural nature culture, understanding our spiritual nature culture, understanding our African concepts of health culture. All of this knowledge is necessary for our children to rise as proactive, productive adults. With this cultural education comes economic prosperity, and with economic prosperity comes national power as a people. Once we restore our power as a people, then comes our liberation from adverse forces, and then comes our salvation, having the power to keep adverse forces away from us. Black power is the only power our children should know, respect, and be educated about. Question: what is more important than our liberation? There is nothing more important than the liberation of any people. We watch the news, the Ukrainian people's fight to maintain their liberation from Russia. Who wants to rule them? We have China, who argues that Taiwan does not have a right to exist as a sovereign nation and must come under the rule of homeland China. Now, think about this, guys. You got the Russians invading the Ukrainians because, according to the news reports, that the leader of Russia believes that the Ukrainians should be ruled by Russia. So that the people in Ukraine don't have a right to their own sovereignty. The people in Ukraine don't have the right to their own self-determination to decide how they want to live as a people. See, this is what's wrong with this sick planet. You know, people trying to impose their cultural ideals on you. China is trying to do the same thing with Taiwan. China is telling Taiwan they don't have a right to exist as a sovereign nation. This is madness. Every person born on this free earth has the natural nature right to be free, to live as they so choose in peace. No people or person should impose their will on another to live how they want that person to live, including adults and their adult children. Young children must live according to the will of their parents, who are raising them until the child becomes an adult themselves, being able to choose right from wrong. Adult children must choose their own path. If parents raise their children the right way, then that child will most likely follow the path of the parents, provided there is no outside influences that we are arguing that white people impose on us. So meaning what we're trying to say is that as long as you don't allow outside influences to infect your child, once they become an adult, they should follow the path you laid out for them. Of course, that's almost impossible living here because European media and cultures everywhere. You step out the house and you see billboards everywhere. You see, advertisements for alcohol stores, liquor stores, and smoke and buying cigarettes. And I mean, it's everywhere. There's bad food everywhere. So it's very difficult to protect your children here. To protect your children from being negatively influenced. It's damn near impossible. This is why we need our own communities, our own land. I mean, that's the one thing about China. They're very mindful of allowing foreigners to influence them, in an adverse way. The goal of this discussion is to make clear that liberation comes with culture. If you are subject to foreign cultures, then you will be subject to foreign rulership. Liberation can only come when you decide to live, when you decide how to live. You make the rules as a nation of people, not as individuals. We are a conquered and divided people because we have divided concepts on culture, and we will stay a conquered people until we have a meeting of the minds on what culture is best for us to live. We argue as Sabians that Wu-Sabat is the natural nature genetic culture of all Black African, Moorish, woolly hair people worldwide, and we are willing to defend these claims in peaceful discussions. So let us talk for those who truly want liberation. Okay, and so what we argue is that Wu-Sabat is our genetic culture. I don't want to confuse a genetic culture with the culture that we've developed through the societies that we live in, because that's usually how people get, connect with culture. They're born and raised into it, and that's just the customs and ways that the people that they're born into, that's how they live. But that doesn't mean it has nothing to do with your culture by genetics. And I talk about this a lot. For instance, as African people, genetically, we need to be in lands where we have a lot of sun energy. That's just a genetic fact. And so we supposed to be outdoors majority of the time. That's just a genetic fact. I don't care how much you like being indoors. Genetically, if you want to maintain your health and sanity, you need to be outdoors. That's just a fact about us. And there's many genetic facts about us culturally that we ignore. We literally just ignore. And that's what Wu-Sabat is trying to correct, that you cannot ignore your genetic culture and think that you're going to be in harmony, or you think that you're going to be healthy. You're not. Ain't going to happen. Okay, T Tiger made a statement. Let's see. It says, I think because Dr. York comes off as a Jesus, which seems as he's copying other culture, and with the idea of space aliens, and that Dr. York can't seem to save himself, nor had for knowledge of his dismissal. I'm not sure on a spelling. If it has nothing to do with you, why am I watching? Why do you think I'm watching? Silly. Okay. Okay. So for T Tiger, but see, this is the thing. I've been doing my lectures since 2016, as I said. Okay. So anyone can see. Anyone can see on my YouTube channel. Okay. The first lecture I did 6 years ago. In fact, one of the first lectures I did, Dr. York, child molester, or con man, or savior. That was the second lecture I did that I put on YouTube 6 years ago. If anyone who honestly wants to know anything about the master teacher and what we teach, rather than taking hearsay about what we teach, all you have to do is watch our lectures, read our books, listen to the master teacher yourself. If you have any specific questions, because like let's say on the ET subject, we wrote a book on it. It's called The Man from the Planet Risk. We wrote a whole book on it. Now, can you honestly say, T Tiger, you read that book and you analyzed the information in the book? And if you're in doubt about it, if you did read it, if you're in doubt, that's why brothers like myself exist, to address questions that people have pertaining to what the master teacher taught. So I understand, yes, that Dr. York comes off as a Jesus figure, but what's wrong with that if what he's doing is factual? Most people do not understand the biblical Jesus. Most people know Jesus from the media, from TV, from movies. Most Christians don't even read their Bible intently to really understand what Jesus was really about. the principles he lived by. If Christians understood that, they wouldn't be eating pork. Did Jesus eat pork? No, he didn't eat no pork. But you can't have a picnic without Christians having pork in it, especially in the South. And I was totally against the culture that Jesus lived by. And if you're going to call yourself a Christian, that means you're Christ-like. That means you're following the example of Christ. And they had strict dietary laws that Jesus adhered to. Christians don't adhere to it. They come up with this weird excuse that guy Paul claiming that they didn't have to follow the law, that he contradicts Jesus. Yes, you are under the law. But if people have questions on why the master puts himself out there like a Jesus figure, there's a reason for that. There's a reason why the master put those images out there. Rather than people should not assume why we're doing it. You should just ask us, why do we do it? What does this picture represent? Why is the picture important to put there? Why did the master teacher do that? Rather than assume, people just rather assume why we do what we do and then slander and say he's this or he's that. It's slander, it's slander, it's slander. Okay, question. Capre says you have a question about the man from the planet Risk, page 105 to 115. Are there agreeable anuniki on Risk? That's a good question. I can't answer that question. That's a question for the master teacher, whether or not there whether or not there are Nuniki that live on the planet Risk along with the Nathar. That's a good question. Well, we got to keep in mind that, and maybe another brother might know the answer to that question. So I'll put that out there. But we got to also keep in mind that we know some of the Anunnaki worked with the Nathar, Enki being one, right? He worked with the Nathar. He married a Nathar. So it is reasonable to think that there would be Anunnaki existing on the planet Risk. If we're gonna try to reason that out without having a direct answer to that question, because I don't, the master never, broke down, at least to my knowledge. We're still working on this Anunnaki versus the Nathar thing. There's, a lot of questions dealing with that. And we've yet to have a book that really give a detailed breakdown between the difference between the two, at least that I know of. So, yeah, that's an interesting question. And T Tiger says, as I said, that may be why you may be losing people. And it's my opinion. And I watch a lot of your videos. I don't slander Dr. York, and that's never my intentions towards anyone. No, T Tiger, you're right. That is a lot of people are turned off. I know that. A lot of people are turned off by some of the imagery we put out there, the posters we put out there, and the things that the master teacher says, being that he's the savior to our people, he's the one who has the solution to all of our problems. And it does seem like a contradiction with him getting arrested, and it's like, how can he save our people? And then the question is, he can't save himself and all of that. But see, those types of questions only exist because the individual who are asking those questions don't know our doctrine and do not know what the master teachers stand for and stand on. If you understood our doctrine, then I think the answers become more clear. So let me just try to address this one before we close out, because it is about that time. Now, if you was to understand or understand the master teacher, there's a book we put out, The Science of Healing, right? And in The Science of Healing, it goes to, not The Science of Healing, the science of creation. Okay. And if you study the book we put out called The Science of Creation, the master teacher is explaining existence. He's explaining how existence came into being. And that existence, as we know it, is based on different realms or different planes of existence. So, for instance, we all here are existing on what we call the third dimension. Okay. But as the master teacher has made it very clear to us, is that this is one dimension of 9, or one realm of 9 other realms. And I tried to explain this in right here you have this diagram, the SMAT circle, and on the bottom is the third dimension. Okay. And that's where humans exist. When you move into the next level, which is the 4th realm, this is the realm we say the ETs exist. Okay. Now, anyone who has a question about ETs, the only thing I can say, that's because the person's ignorant about the subject matter. They haven't studied it. You know, we live in 2022. Nobody should be ignorant about the ET phenomena, extraterrestrials. They shouldn't be, because there's tons and tons of data out there to substantiate, you know, the concept of other beings existing throughout the multiverse. But here's my point. Now, when people say Dr. York is stuck in prison, he can't free himself. That's because you guys are talking from a third dimensional point of view, from a mind of a mortal. But you have ETs that people say 1 minute they see a ship, next minute it disappears. Well, if it did exist in the third dimension, then it disappears, well, where the heck did the ship go? Well, if you know anything about how these realms work, that these beings are able to phase into this dimension and then phase back out into the other dimension. And one of the things the master teacher has been teaching us from day one, he says all Black African people have these abilities, where you have the ability to raise yourself up into the 4th realm, the 5th realm, the 6th realm, all the way up to 9. And the master said, I'm an incarnation and I have those abilities. I have the ability to go to all these other realms. So the question I would ask, if this is true, and you put a person like this in a cage on the third dimension, is he really in a cage? Is he really locked down? He's only locked away from humans on the third dimension. He's not locked away from the other realms, because the Caucasian doesn't have such powers. But again, it's hard for someone to comprehend a thought like that if you don't know anything about our doctrine, if you don't know anything about what we teach, and you're not familiar with other realms of existence. Most of our people that are ignorant to that reality. So they only think their minds are locked, because they only think based on the knowledge that they're given by Caucasians who don't share this kind of information with you. That's why the master teacher said, well, if you guys research the Caucasian more, like research the Philadelphia experiment, research the Roswell incident, research a lot of the things that they do put out there that lets you know that there's so much to existence that we're not aware of. But Black people love to judge others by their limited intellect and think they're smart and think they're right. T Tiger. Okay, be cool. We gotta always respect our sisters. You know, we gotta always respect our sisters, respect our people. And it's about us always being positive, regardless of what we may feel someone else, because only positivity can destroy negativity. Guys, we always gotta remember that, right? Only positivity can destroy negativity. Of course, you know, the Caucasian teach the opposite. That's why he has all these guns. because he thinks that you keep the peace by the threat of war, and we know that's crazy thinking. Okay, guys. So let's always keep it respectful. Let's see. Kepre plus he always said he's subject to the rules of this round while he's here. So it's not that they may be ignorant, they find it hard to believe because the Bible that they are trying to get out of facts. No, I hear you, T Tiger. But now as far as what you're saying, it's not about beliefs, right? It's not about beliefs. That's why we teach the culture. Wu-Sabat is about sound right reasoning. Your ancestors in ancient Kemet, they made their decisions based on sound reasoning, right? Sound reasoning is based on experience, evidence, and high levels of reasoning. Our people lost those abilities to reason. Why you think we're being ruled by the Caucasian? Because our reasonability is shot. It really is. The master was introducing us to concepts we never heard of, man. I remember one of the first questions I asked the master teacher, like, okay, because this is back in like 1990, and I asked him, all right, so he said creation creation came about by way of the science of the circle and the square, and he said you had to create something, he had to create something, or to create a state of nothingness to put something in it. And so at the time, when I first came into it, I'm young. I'm like, what the heck does that mean? You got to create a state of nothingness to put something in it, and how he explained it was just way over my brain at the time. And it took me years to begin to comprehend that concept. But I was a diligent student. I kept studying, I kept reading, I kept researching. Most people, that's what I was saying earlier, most individuals who come into this information leave because they're not diligent students. They don't want to research. They don't want to study. They lack the patience. They lack the willpower to do. And they'll just brush off. This is why we have so many negative, disgruntled members who say Dr. York is this and Dr. York is that. But what you'll find out is, okay, when it came to living a culture and living according to the principles, you'll find out they didn't do it. They didn't do it. Remember, Dr. York is a spiritual master teacher. If you're not doing none of the spiritual work, then what's the point of being a student if you're not going to focus on developing yourself spiritually? I've met brothers who didn't meditate. They're not meditating. They're not doing the prayers. They're not doing the rituals. They're not doing none of the things to develop themselves spiritually, which increases your reasonability, increases your intellect. And then they leave, and then they start. That's like being a part of a basketball team, always sitting on the bench, wondering why you can't start. Maybe because you never practice. And then you leave the team, and then you start slandering the team. That coach ain't nothing. That team ain't this. That team ain't that. But hell, you never practice. You never dribble the ball in the damn gym. How you expect to start? How you expect to get in the game? You never did none of the things it take to be a player in the game. But our people like to complain. But that's all good, guys. It's about that time. I know, I might have missed some questions. I'm sorry for that. It's just so much. It's so much. But we're at that time. We're at that time. We're gonna close out. I'll be back next week. And we're gonna continue this. So we always end, for those who don't know, we always end our discussions. We always end our discussions with our prayer ritual, right? Our prayer ritual. So if I can pull that up. I always do the prayer rituals for those who do not know in our language. We call Lahaj. Language means Lahaj in Sabaic. You have the English underneath so that you can follow me. For those who want to get clarity on the prayer systems and why we do it, I highly recommend guys studying the lecture we did on prayers, why we pray. It's about spiritual development, why we do these, prayers and chants. It's about spiritual development. So I think it's extremely important you understand that, because it's not about religion. Don't confuse spirituality and spiritual development with religious dogma and religious practices. It's very important. I don't want people to be confused by that. Even though we'll say, from time to time that Wu-Sabat is a religion. We put it in this book. I was going to show this book today. I didn't get a chance to show it, but we have it right here. This book is called the for those who don't know, it's called the Proverbs of Yananan. For those who can get it. Excellent. It's one of our newer books that just came out not too long ago. And in this particular book, we put, the master does that to help people, because people, they just our culture is about spirituality, not religion, but we use it because people, they have a hard time comprehending it otherwise. So we have animism, Wu-Sabat here, Wu-Nawab, Sabatism, Sabaism, Sabaism, all the same. All of it is under NoopooH, right? NoopooH, that is really what the culture is about. The universe was created based on the forces of NoopooH. And the adverse forces are Zupooh. The Mukasa represents Zupooh, which is 6 ether. And we as Nagato represent NoopooH, which is 9 ether, right? That's what we are. That's who we are, guys. That's who we are. So with that being said, let me get back to our prayer. And we get started. All right. Bade Kala Namasat Wufad Ko Amad Kasamun Shalal Poot Pa Takyu Anuki Jawef Pa Ashuk Impa Poot Wu Kala Ashuk Kawun Jarefnia Anuki Kasamun Impa Poot Wu Pa Poot Kawun Kasamun Imnia Anuki Wahu Ama Pa Poot Wu Pa Poot Kawun Wahu Amatnia Naku Kador Naju Amad Kasamun Impa Poot Wu Khabu Amad Muskasun Naku Kador Kawan Kalep Pafaf Naku Diyar Jawep Pa Poot Amad Wase Amad Diyani Kawun Lake Bakui Jawep Pa Poot Anuki Yabad B Nafasni Pa Poot Kawun Anuki Pa Poot Kador Naku Kador Pa Poot Amul Naku Amul Lahehum Menehnun Lahehum Menehnun Ahmata Karehum Ahmata Karekum Ahmata Karenun Ahmata Jawefnia Ahmata Nia Wu Anuki Hum Yaye Ashuk Re'e Asmua Jaye Nun Yaye Nataru Afuk Nun Anunata Mukra Ukum Yaye Nataru Afuk Nun Afuk Nun Afuk Nun Yaye Nataru Nun Anun Atum Atun Amun Namazo Wahu Yaye Mufaku Yaye Yaye Nataru Yaye Soye Yaye Nataru Yaye Hika Yaye Nataru Ankum Atapa Mufaku Yayehu Yaye Nataru Ankum Atapa Mufaku Anunata Mukra Ukum Ankum Ata Musanun Yayehu Yaye Nataru Aro Muklasnum Atum Reye Yayehu Yaye Nataru Namazo Atu Aronhu Yaye Muktamu Afudnun Ankum Mana Yakelo Dudu Muslafunun Wu Musanun Mana Yakek Sawura Paba Mana Yakek Kawuna Ka'u Mana Yakek Ata Akak Mana Yakek Kawuna Bashar Wu Damam Yaye Nataru Muktamunun Aro Muftanun Anhu Kawun Manza Mana Pan Nataru aro enhu kawun babi inanan, aro enhu kawun atum re'e, aro enhu kawun haror, namazor dalu. Ya ye no taro muslafunun, afutnu menepa mujwa'u, afutnu menega ha'en, ya ye no taro afutnun, menesa yara, afutnia, afutnia, ya ye no taro nun, namazo rabo pa takmui. Nakuk talub tapmui bi pa nataru, manepa laen lawi tanenu, kale ranum atni at the lahe pa nataru, wu kale namazo atni at the lahe kayat iatun laye pa nataru, pa sawa wu pa tara. Panem misfa kawun, pa sawa wu pa tara, z kawuna nazula lahe enkum, mane maspa wu masa, ame hade en wu damal mane muslafu kum wu nataru aju laye nafasu kum afuk shene kawun kum pa sawabu paturu pa hade en wu pa damal en tawu en kum lahe penen damal wu shafe Anun tawa ankum lahetem nasuinun. Anun tawa ankum lahe ashukuma. Ankum at the muslafunun. Anun at the mukra'ukum. Anun talub nasakuma. Anun talub nasakuma. And so nun kahen nataru. And so nu muslafunun anunata muspatu anun atun amun yaye notaru nun yaye muftau yaye notaru Ya ye atumure, ya ye natar, ya ye nun tat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye natar, ya ye hatat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye kak, ya ye natar, ya ye kak tat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye amun, ya ye natar, Ya ye amuntat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye atum, ya ye natar, ya ye shishash, ya ye natar, ya ye tafaf natat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye sabab, ya ye natar, ya ye natat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye arash tat, ya ye natar tat, Ya ye asar, ya ye natar, ya ye nababtat hatat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye satak, ya ye natar, ya ye hara, ya ye natar, ya ye haptwi, ya ye natar, ya ye anaktat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye ahaharatwi, ya ye natar, Ya ye nafartun, ya ye natar, ya ye manthu, ya ye natar, ya ye bapti, ya ye natar, ya ye sachamtat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye hata haratat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye ba'ibes, ya ye natar, ya ye patata, ya ye natar, Ya ye basastat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye imhatap, ya ye natar, ya ye hu, ya ye natar, ya ye matat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye mahat, ya ye natar tat, ya ye khafaf re'e, ya ye natar, ya ye miskinat, ya ye natar tat, Ya ye re'e tat, Ya ye natar tat, Ya ye Kentiman to you. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Hika'a. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Ma'at. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Horanen Tat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye She. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Sashat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Mafdat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Sabak. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Anak. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Hanun. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Hanas. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Patatanun. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Soye. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Haktat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Amas. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Saraptwi. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Atum Re'e. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Dehutwi. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Patata Warat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Sakar Tat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Ha. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Neheb Ka'a. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Sakar. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Ba'a. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Akar. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Imharatat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Wapawatat. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Sochat Hatap Tat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Merdi Tat Sikar Tat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Soye Tat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Garatat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Asat Inu. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Bahatat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Hanam Tat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Manaktat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Chamem. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Mahatwi. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Kabepsin and Afaf. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Damata Afaf. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Merdi Tat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Nasat. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Imdadat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Nachakbatat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Sachatat. Sachatat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Anaktat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Dadad. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Tun. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Wahoo. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Yesas. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Anach. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Afnuit. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Satat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Sakatwi. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Immat. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Nana. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Imnuit. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Imsataktwi. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Mutal Tat. Ya ye Nathar Tat. Ya ye Rahashafaf. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Maratwi. Ya ye Nathar. Ya ye Amun Re'e. Ya ye Nathar. Yehu and after Kaleh Jawef Pa'ut Ahnun Re'e Ahtun Re'e Ahtun Re'e Ahmun Re'e Ye'on Amun. 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 Jennifer. Okay, again, for those who are not familiar with our prayer systems, we do our prayer systems at 9 a.m., 3 p.m., and 9 p.m. We ask people to do it at these times for synchronization. We're able to connect with each other spiritually. It adds to our power. It adds to because prayer is affirmation, is about giving forth words, commandments, concepts to make things happen, and we have those abilities to do it, and it's about us coming together to develop ourselves in these ways spiritually. Also, the chanting helps raise our vibration. And of course, once you do these prayers, I always talk about, you're supposed to go into a meditated state. Of course, I can't do that. We're online, but you're supposed to go into a meditated state after you go through the prayer systems. As master teacher always taught us, prayer is your way of communicating with your ancestors in the thought, and meditation is your way of listening to their response. So I think that's important to keep that in mind. With that being said, let's see. My opinions are my opinions, and I'm never afraid to express my mind to anyone. Yeah, it's okay. But yeah, she's not me. Okay. All right, I repeat, guys, let's maintain Ashuk. Let's maintain the love. Let's maintain the love. Let's always maintain the love. I'm here to try my best to answer questions as I'm able to do. Of course, I know I didn't probably get to everyone's question. I'm sorry for that. We're controlled by time, but I do the best I can do, and I try to maintain a peace with everyone. As best I can. Because all we got. All we have is each other, guys. All we have is each other. If we can't find a way to do it, no one else will. We have to solve our own challenges, and we need each other to do it. As we always teach, we can succeed as a part of all, but we will fail as individuals. And Black people, we have a history of having an issue with each other. And this goes back to slavery, the so-called house Negro versus the field Negro. The Mukasu, they played on our divisions, and we have to overcome our divisions. I can't stress that enough. Now, with that being said, okay, I'm sorry. Clifton, what happened to the 9-ball count 5? That's an excellent question. The 9-ball count 5. Keep in mind, when the master teacher was writing the 9-ball series in the 1970s, he decided to switch from teaching the 9-ball information, because that was the beginning of nature knowledge, right? And so we went into the school of Ansar Allah, Islamic doctrine, teaching Ansar doctrine out of the Sudan, the Sufi doctrine out of the Sudan. So he took a back step, because when the master teacher was trying to introduce us to the 9-ball knowledge, nature information, it was just above our people's minds at that time. You got to keep in mind, we're talking about the 1970s, and so the master put that information to the side, and he began to update the 9-ball and the Bible interpretations with the right knowledge scrolls. If you study the right knowledge scrolls, we began to put out in the early 1990s, 92, 93, 94, and you compare those scrolls to the 9-ball and the Bible interpretations of books that we put out in the late 60s, you will see that those books were updates. And then he updated it again. If you read the right knowledge scrolls that the master teacher revised in the year 2001, he put 4 books out, right? What is NoopooH? The Right Knowledge Scroll, Breaking the Spell, and Our True Roots. If you study those 4 books, the ones that came out in the 2000s, if you don't have access to it, you could download it for free on Scribes, right? You can download it for free on scribes.com. And those books are another update from those books, the nine ball and Bible interpretations. Also, he started updating that with the actual facts. So if you read, I was reading the Pod Tadak. I did a lecture on it. There's a Pod Tadak called the what is that lecture I did? The lecture we did on the Pod Tadak. We did a lecture, right? We did a lecture on that books. And this lecture right here that I did, if you look at this lecture, we did this lecture, episode 24, the way, aka Patadak. Those Patadaks that I've read, there were actually updates from the again from the Bible interpretations and the nine ball information. Now, some people will also say, I don't know if you're familiar with the nature and nature doctrine. If you look at the nature and nature doctrine, that is a direct update from the nine ball. I mean, a very direct, because it's written in the same style and format. Okay, because when you look at our doctrine, as far as the Patadaks and the actual facts and the books the master teacher put out, we have a different way the master puts those books together, as opposed to when you're looking at the nine ball and the Bible interpretations, that has a different format. But the nature books, they were done in this exact same format as the nine ball scrolls. And so that those books are also, I would argue, is an update, because the master has been updating the nature books and the actual facts. So if you look at the actual facts, like the natural ether energy actual fact, I forget which number that is. There's a number of them, and I've been going over them in the lectures. They've been updated. My point is this: the nine ball has been updated. So yes, you have the new information. It doesn't say nine ball count 5 or count 6. The master just gave that updated information in other books and just gave different names to them, is my main point. So I hope that, helps. I hope that helps. So with that being said, guys, again, like I said, it's that time. And, I'll be back next week. And I pray to see you guys all. I hope you guys are safe. Right? Be safe, man, because it's dangerous out there. So be safe. I can't stress that enough. Until then, much love. Right? We're gonna make it, man. We're gonna make it, guys. We're gonna do it. What we saw, we're gonna win. We're gonna win. What's that? Young Elder talks about it. We're gonna win because we can dance and they can't. I like that. We're gonna win. Never stop, though.
mama.